Hey guys, let's have a listen to some of the highlights that I found during the Drunk Turkey Show's interview of Mr. Goncalves.
You if the battery life what it is. So when this moron turned off his phone, hard turned it off with 90 some plus battery life, and he's sitting in his car driving around. People, you're fools if you think that this is just all coincidence. Here's another coincidence that they're going to be checking on. So how many stargazing apps do you got on that phone? How many you got on there, Bo? Because I don't think you got any. And believe it or not, those are actually pretty popular apps. I was shocked. So the amount of detail that these investigators have done, it's impressive. I mean, these are great, hardworking men. They shouldn't be attacked. They should.
So, this is a little nugget that Mr. G drops that, according to their experts, the state's experts, Brian Koberger's phone was turned off and it had 97% battery. And so that would dismiss any idea that it was turned off because his battery had died. He also mentions that they've done such a deep dive, they've considered things such as him having a stargazing app on his phone, which I have too. So I understand his point, but you could argue that. And the other thing is, we don't really, do we know that he turned off his phone? I mean, these are the questions that we have. And I feel like we know the answer to that. And the answer is we don't know. But it sounds like Mr. G does know. And so I don't believe he's lying. I believe that's what he believes. So is it true? It could be. It's just who gives him this information, right? And so that's the problem with this case.
It just felt like people were sacks of flesh. I mean, everything this guy did, and to think that some people are still following a narrative that he has been all set up. Like, who set you up when they don't even know who you are? And that's another way. You're going to plant somebody's DNA and they're not in CODIS? What are you, stupid? And there's criminals all around your community that you could literally plant that and they'd be arrested and never see a day of light and they'd be over and done with. Nobody would even question it. But you're gonna go after this PhD guy who.
I mean, I understand his point. I mean, I've asked myself the same question. I'm actually asking myself that right now, and I don't have an answer for it. I think that's why I got so deep into the genealogy because I felt that the touch DNA is so unreliable that it's hard to fathom. So, so what was the motive again to frame Brian? It's just I'm trying to understand that part. I wonder how they would explain how they're going to explain that. It's just an interesting point he raises. I feel like I it has something to do with a relative or something.
On some of the TV channels, they're pretty much live, and even if they're not live, they're not scripted in any shape or form. So we can't go into details like this. So I want to take advantage of on that Brian Talley. His little thumbs up asshole pic.
Yeah.
I think less. I figured it out. I think it's like 14 hours later he's calling in sick.
Which is super interesting because when I saw the picture of him with the thumbs up, I think I said he looks like he's ill or withdrawing from drugs or something like that. He just didn't look very well. And so he called in sick. He didn't go to school, I guess, and teach or whatever that Monday. So, before you dismiss that and say that's ridiculous and that doesn't mean anything, we have to consider some of the things that we consider meaningful, some of the connections we make that are like, oh, that maybe that means something, right? Is it a coincidence? I mean, it is something that I think is, you just have to consider it before you just dismiss it. I mean, he's got a lot of these things that he goes through in this video. And I'm not saying Brian's innocent or guilty. I presume he's innocent until I see the trial. I'm just saying the people that are so hard on Mr. Gonsalves, what he's saying here sounds reasonable.
For work, and that's the only day he ever called.
Mhm.
So he's obsessed with the crime that he did and going through the media. This is all going to be part of the search history. You guys are all going to see it, and there's a thing. There's exclusive knowledge. If you know about a certain part of a crime before it's made general public, or maybe before it even happens, it's pretty damning. To me, there's nothing more damage. But I also thought.
So it turns out that day was the only day Brian had ever called out ever. So it does make it a little bit more suspicious if you add it on top of a bunch of other things, including his quote DNA, his touch DNA, right? But regardless, this other thing that he just said is super interesting. And it makes me think that maybe Brian Koberger was Papa Rogers. You know, he's saying that there's knowledge of the crime that only the perpetrator would have. And these are things that they found in his computer. And he's saying that knowledge of the crime before it happened. Now, I don't know if he's worried, if I don't think he's referring to the K bar. I think he's referring to something in the computer. And it just makes me think of either the 4chan board where the guy came on there and said he was in shithole Pennsylvania and then it got like shut down. It was crazy. There was some ruckus on there. And then it also makes me think of Papa Rogers and these other people. So I don't know. I think, and then he's upset because people aren't convinced by that. I didn't even know that. Where does it say that in the documents, or is he inferring it, or is somebody telling him that's what this means? That's what I'm saying. It's hard to be. I believe everything he's saying, or at least I believe he believes everything he's saying. He has no reason to lie. So, and he has more access to things than I do, right? But this case is just so messed up and twisted. It's really hard, you know, and I feel really badly for him. Uh, I'm keeping my mind open until the trial. You know, I still have the presumption of innocence. But a lot of the things he's saying in this interview are interesting, and you can see why he thinks Brian is guilty if these things are all true.
People would change their tune when the Amazon order puts the murder weapon in his house, and his own family is like wondering what the heck's going on. And when I say family, I believe it's just one sister that was really
That's the issue, though, Mr. Gonsalves, and you must have asked yourself the same question, and you probably have more information, I'll assume, than I do. But we still haven't been told for sure that the murder weapon is the K bar, and they haven't found the murder weapon. And we've heard so many differing stories about the wounds and how they're different. And so that's where a lot of this question comes in. It is really interesting, though, about his sister being concerned about his behavior, you know, and talking. We heard all those rumors, and I don't, that's not something I knew about or is in any court document or anything like that. So that's where the other question comes up. And I might just not have seen it. That's possible. But these are things that he's taking for facts, right? And if they're not in a court document, they're not coming in as evidence. And so that those are the questions I have for all the stuff that we talk about out here, for all of it.
helpful. Where the other people weren't so much helpful.
Well, I mean, they're pretty specific on the March 20th to March 30th time frame for that knife purchase. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, somebody was able to tell them exactly when that happened, even though the history had been deleted. Why do you delete this? I mean, why would you delete that? If you're this outdoor hunter, CSI, because I hear all these people, oh, he's a CIS grad, he's gonna have all this weird stuff. You're not gonna have knowledge of a crime, bro. You're not gonna have knowledge of the crime. That is not public knowledge.
You're not going to have knowledge of the crime, bro. That is not public knowledge. I'm telling you, it sounds like he was one of these internet people that we thought he may have been. I think insider looking was ruled out and outsider looking. And maybe Papa Rogers was ruled out, but I feel like, or there were 4chan posts that were made, because there was a lot of those made in the beginning too, specifying certain things, and a lot of them were deleted. And there was definitely federal activity on that board. So this should be really interesting. Although they haven't had any 4chan warrants, so they probably aren't looking. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe it's one of the sealed warrants. I'm. This case is a mind fuck.
You're not gonna have it. I don't care. And it doesn't explain doing surveys and doing all these weird things and creeping every girl out. And the list of the red flags is what really frustrates me, because this guy had been harassing girls all the way back to high school. We've talked to people all the way to high school. Like the girl that was literally like, he's obsessed with me. And it was like extremely embarrassing. I'd walk into the classroom and everyone was like, is he going to be that awkward weirdo that stares at you all day long? And so this goes all the way back to school, and they've interviewed and talked to all these different people. So it frustrates me that you can harass people at school, and because of the way the system is, you kind of go unnoticed. You kind of are able to pull it off because nobody wants to drag those victims into a court case. Nobody wants to do it.
So he's stating a lot of allegations here that I'm assuming are true, that he has evidence of this. So this seems like it's probably, I don't know, maybe not cool according to the gag order to be saying this stuff, but I think he's just sick and tired of it. He did say a long time ago that he would start talking if he felt he needed to. And also, I don't think the timing is a coincidence with a lot of the things that dropped today that make Dylan, look suspicious. So he's strategic, that's for sure. And he's a grieving father.
Yeah, I mean, he talks about the right outfit that you would want to commit this crime in, and then they have him purchasing. Maybe it's not exactly the same, but we all know what a Dickies outfit. One of the thing. It's basically what Michael Myers wore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's. I guess some people like to be lied to. They like to be manipulated and strung around. It's a bizarre thing for me. As a father, I never want that for my kids. I want my kids to think on their own and not be naive and get led astray. But maybe some people just.
Him talking about people liking to be lied to and led astray and everything is so interesting to me because we have people on both sides of this case saying the exact same thing. If you look in the comments under Drunk Turkey Show, they're like, anyone who thinks he's innocent or isn't guilty is a moron, or they're not looking at the case. And then you have people in other comment sections or even creators being like, anybody who doesn't realize what's going on now and that this is how it happened is just a moron and isn't willing to face the truth, right? These people, all of these people are equally convinced that they're correct. But this is one of the victim's father, so I think it's important to really take in what he's saying and understand it.
Honestly, I think I just go to the simplest. Why has he got a shovel in the back of his car?
Sure.
And it's not these idiots, because there's a cool brother out there right now thinking to themselves that they're smart. No, you're stupid. You're an idiot. It was a mini one. It wasn't very big. You don't use it for snow. So anybody who thinks he was using that for snow, you're just a moron. You don't live out here. Nobody uses a shovel like that. You use a shovel like that for dirt, and it has a super tip. So yeah, driving around with a shovel tells me that he probably had something to do with that, because then that gives him the ability to go back and get it.
Mm-hmm.
And he showed all these. This was a fantasy for him.
Yeah.
He planned it for a long time. And so that was going to be, the FBI were the ones that told they would be surprised about the kill kit. So it wasn't like I came up with that and I had some insight about this true crime stuff. I didn't know. They told me they wouldn't be surprised if he surveilled the house multiple times. They wouldn't be surprised if he snuck into the house. Now, whether he did or not, I'm not saying he did. I'm not saying he did or he didn't. I don't know that. But I don't know that the profile that they built of this individual said that this person was going to surveil the house and be comfortable with it. Because, I mean, it's a knife. I mean, when you use a knife, it shows a certain level of planning and a comfort level that you're going to go in there. And these houses, people might not know this either, that these floor plans after COVID, they all went online. They put floor plans so you didn't have to ask to go see these houses.
So this is where we see all of that early stuff that he was saying, that he surveilled the property and he planned this and he's this type of person. The FBI told Steve and Christy before Brian was caught the profile of the person that they thought who did this. And when Brian was caught, he was just assuming he was all of those things, or maybe some of those things, because he had bits and pieces of things he had been told that matched that. And so that makes sense. And even the profile they built of this person, it does make sense. However, there's still a lot of things that do not make any sense that this would be Brian. And so he's convinced. I see why he's convinced. He says a few more other interesting things here. Let's take a listen.
You could go online, most of these rental places, and see the whole floor plan, including this one, because this is called the Queens on the Kings Road. This is called the Queens on the Kings Road. This is where the Queens were, because it was on Kings Road, and it was the house that for multiple generations where every kid wanted to be, because of the location put you, as soon as you got off the campus from the football game, you were right there. So you could go drink and not be.
That is super interesting. The Queens on King Road, the house that everybody for generations wanted to be at after a football party.
And if you wonder why 911 wasn't called, use your brain, guys. I mean, maybe you didn't go to college. You don't need to go to college to understand that. You want to get off campus and you want to have a beer with your friends. And if you got somebody who's 21 and somebody who's not 21, you better talk to the person who's 21 before you call 911. Yeah. Or that's standard protocol, right? That's the standard protocol. Because if that six-pack in the fridge has got 2 beers and those 2 beers are in somebody's room that they should be in, now graduation, your finals are over. You're sitting in you're getting a citation or who knows what goes with that. So.
Yeah.
People can read.
So the family is not upset with Dylan at all. And in fact, the internet, including myself, was more outraged by her reaction. So that's super interesting to me, too. And I still have my questions about Dylan. Are we really that naive at that age? I don't remember ever being that naive. And the avoidance of the 911 call really concerns me, the passing around of it. The problem is that once people make up their minds about something, they generally don't change it because they don't want to think that they're wrong, or they don't want to question their opinion, or uh, whatever determination they made about something. Obviously, I'm not like that because I have feelings about things and I lean ways, and I know that ultimately there is an absolute truth that can be found out, but sometimes we can't find it out now.
And I know that there's some people looking at this exact same angle. So much so, they're like, I've heard a scenario where Xana goes in. Let's say she goes in, she gets her meal prepared, the DoorDash meal, goes to the bathroom, goes to her room, something, goes back into the kitchen and says, "Oh, there's somebody here." How does she know that? Because that slider's been left wide open, and there's a kill kit, something there, some kind of package, some kind of thing that raises a flag that somebody just came into my house, and maybe you're hearing noises upstairs, and yeah. So I've seen a couple different scenarios that have been discussed. I don't have anything concrete. I'm not, I can't go there, but I think that
So that was pretty interesting as well. Is that in the court documents? It may be, but saying that that Brian is the one saying, "It's okay, I'm here to help." He just said that that was part of the death penalty qualifier. Is that sealed information? Because I don't remember hearing that. If so, that's interesting. And I wonder how they prove that that's Brian saying that. I guess because they're saying he's the perpetrator. Yeah, I guess if he's convicted, the death penalty phase, that would be part of qualifying it because he was there and he could have walked
Well, the
away.
dog barking at the exact same time that you can hear whimpering and a thud says that the glass door had to have been open. It sounds like when Dylan woke up and she heard who she thought was Kaylee, probably because of the dog going up at the same time. Uh, it was actually Xana coming downstairs. Well, Murphy would have been running with her, and it sounds like she went to Ethan and Murphy went outside. And I think when she hears somebody say, "It's okay, I'm here to help you," is that confrontation in the hallway between maybe Xana turns around to see what's going on, and there he is, and he says that in order to surprise her, I guess.
yeah.
Okay, I listened to that 3 times and I still don't know what Daniel's talking about. I understand the part about Xana being in the kitchen, but then the thud and the dog barking, and then that's Xana running. Did he say down the stairs? That's the part I don't understand because she was in the kitchen. She's not downstairs. She'd be going to her room to get Ethan. But he also mentions the dog. That's when the dog ran outside. I thought the dog was in the room the whole
The
time.
death penalty qualifiers is that actually I'm here to help you when that individual could have just left. They didn't have to kill him. So yeah, so people who talk all this madness about DM, she's been huge to the case, actually massive to the case, and you're going to find out that the late 911 call is actually going to be probably the final call, the final nail in his coffin. So there's even benefits to even the most tragic parts. I mean, the late call, if it leads to different evidence, then it's a good thing. And I say that knowing that my daughter wasn't going to she wasn't going to survive what she was stabbed so many different times.
So this is also super interesting. He feels DM has been a huge asset to the case. I know during the grand jury, or at least according to Howard Bloom, if he's telling the truth, that they were not impressed with DM's testimony, but now they are, and I'm sure there's a reason, right? He didn't just flip it, he's not a stupid guy. But it's super interesting as well, that he's making a comment about this quote late 911 call and how that led to other evidence that's going to be the final nail in Brian's coffin. It's interesting because I don't understand why the defense keeps fighting to keep it out so much. Because to me, I feel like there's more damning evidence in the 911 call against Dylan than against the perpetrator. So, what is it we don't know about this 911 call? He's saying that this quote late 911 call is going to be the final nail in his coffin. And, you know, there's something that 911 call led to that I'm confused so much by it, and I just really want to understand it. He's also mentioning that, it didn't change in terms of if his daughter lived or died, that she would not have survived the attack, even if they had called immediately. Which I believe him. I believe that's what he's been told, and it's probably absolutely true. Is that the case for everyone in the house? I don't know, you know. And either way, I'm still just not understanding why no one called 911. He's saying it's because they didn't want to get in trouble.
And I can clarify a little bit of that too.
Are you referring to him going back out there? Like,
I'm
had she
referring,
called 911 early, then he wouldn't have gone back at 9 o'clock, right?
I'm referring to a couple different things, but the coroner made it clear that at least two of the victims, it's hard for me to talk about, but they basically drowned it on their stab wounds. So the blood wasn't like all over the place, or it would explain why the blood was contained. You know, so if you have a blanket over you and you're doing a lot of internal bleeding, your body will hold a portion of that. So, like I said, everything that these people are trying to spin into some crazy conspiracy actually has a scientific background of why it is the way it is. And it's not Hollywood. It's not officers or a vacuum cleaner that went in there and vacuumed up stuff or whatever these crazy people want to say. That I think the vacuum cleaner is just the K-bar with one of the shirts that he grabbed and wrapped it around it. So you have a K-bar in your hand and you wrap a shirt around it. What does it do? It goes big and then goes down.
Yeah.
And I think he just seen the amount of blood. He wasn't sure if it was his. Yeah, he's blood everywhere, so he just wrapped it up and built it out of the house with trying to mitigate the trail as much as he possibly could.
That was really hard to listen to. And it sounds like they had a blanket over their heads and they were killed pretty quickly, probably because of certain points on the body. That was hard, and that was hard for him to say it. My God. It does give an explanation as to why the blood wasn't splattered everywhere. How horrific. And, you know, the other thing, his theory about the K bar looking like a vacuum, it makes sense, right? It doesn't mean it was, we don't know who it was. It could be Brian, maybe not. We don't know. We don't have enough evidence yet, but that makes sense that it looked like a vacuum cleaner. Although there's got to be evidence, I think in the new documents, there's evidence that show that they cleaned, that there was cleaning done. So this case is just such a mind fuck.
The reason why they share certain things with us is they're like, this guy, we don't want him to go on there and say something like that because it's not relevant, because this person literally had a Dickies outfit on, was covered head to toe, had a mask with his eyes. You couldn't even scratch the guy. You couldn't even scratch him. It's like a paper he wrote. It's like the guy wrote about his own crime. I mean, these people, it just blows my mind. I mean, he writes about his own crime. He interviews individuals and investigates them to figure out how he can incorporate that into his crime. We had people write us letters that were like, I was one of the people that was interviewed, and he was obsessed with how I was picking my victims. He was picking victims. This guy said, I told him I picked my victims after they called 911, or their neighbors called 911 on them for a noise complaint, and the husband or the boyfriend was hauled off to jail. Then he would go and he goes, there's certain neighborhoods where they had money, and I would go in there because I knew the mail wasn't there. And he said, and Brian called him back repeatedly, and he said, I got a sense that he was really enjoying my stories and how I was telling passed out women butt naked, and he went into those and was just like, he really liked my story. He liked that. And then I started wondering, well, who was calling 911 on these kids, especially in the daytime, in the middle of the day? They're next to a stadium, a football stadium. How do you get a noise complaint in a college town in the daytime? So maybe you're just trying to figure out how long it takes them.
Well, that's super interesting as well. The 911 calls, we had talked about that, the 911 calls that they were getting repeatedly. And that does tie into why Steve thinks or believes that DM and BF didn't call 911 because they're worried they had too many alcohol complaints. They didn't want to get kicked off of campus, etc., which makes sense. But I know Lana from Truth and Transparency investigated some of those 911 calls, and I know one of them was from a woman up the street who ended up hurting someone with a motor vehicle. You guys remembering this? And then another one was from that Madison boy that lived behind them. So that's kind of interesting too.
And while there's a party, does everybody not come back? Is that what you need to do?
And if you get a warning that if we come back here, we're going to find you, somebody's going to jail.
Yeah.
Might be a time where you want to sneak in or do a little surveillance around that house, because that might be the time where you want to go in there, because the last thing they want to do is pick up and call 911.
It was awfully quiet that night, and I think that a lot of that had to do with, one, there was other parties in other places in town, but two, there was also I guess, minors in possession of alcohol and deterrent going on. There was the stop there by the Banfield by undercover officers in the area trying to stop underage drinking and loud noises. I often wondered if Coburger was aware of that going on that night, and if maybe that's why that led to one of the reasons why, because he knew that there would be some sort of enforcement out that night that would prevent loud parties or a party in that neighborhood.
Yeah, we have somebody who was working in a department that was in charge of all those programs.
Interesting.
So yeah, So yeah, I think where your mind's going is a logical conclusion of what the behavior footprint of this person's done. And believe me, they've analyzed this footprint. I mean, somebody who goes through the exercise of doing a survey in Reddit, and if you go look at the times, the guy had already graduated.
Yeah.
And it wasn't used in his graduation, his whatever, his final.
Thesis.
Yeah, his thesis.
That was a lot of new information as well. And I had assumed that that was part of Brian's thesis. And if in fact this is true, that it was not part of his thesis and that he was just doing that for sport, that's really concerning. But I thought it had his like DeSales EDU, contact information there. I don't remember. I think this is something that's important to know the truth about, though. If he was just doing that after graduation, if he was doing that after graduation, I find that suspicious, highly suspicious. So I really would like to know the facts on that one. Also, Daniel mentions the surveillance team, and they bring that up. And Mr. Gonsalves said they know who was in charge of those teams. And in another part of this interview, which I encourage you to watch the whole thing, they discuss the surveillance in that area and how Jack D would have been caught. So that's how he knows it wasn't Jack D. It's just super interesting. In another part of this interview, he discusses how he thought about having Kaylee's murder tried as a federal charge, and that there was a dual investigation going on, and so that's a definite, right? And so it's another piece that we're still missing, this federal investigation. And I know there's a lot of stuff that has been pointed out that relates to drug trafficking and drug activity in that area. So it's interesting how he's not bringing anything like that up.
This final. So yeah, I'd be shocked if this individual didn't know a lot of what was going on from the police standpoint on both sides of that state, Washington and Idaho. And I think that scared some of the local police departments, and I mean, you read one of them and where they're like, thank God, we didn't hire this guy. It would have been that much uglier if that email that came out saying that he tried to apply for that job when he first came up, but he eventually would have got part of that program. I've been told that program is a requirement for graduation for the PhD. So, well, he was in tune with what those guys were doing.
Yes, but I mean, it sounded like he applied
in the interview. Daniel kind of like challenges them on this, but Mr. Goncalves is right. That was part of his PhD program. He had to do an internship at one of those local police departments. That was just part of his program.
People that they've run the stats on this. A guy at that age, the category, I think they went to like 30 to I think like 19 or 18, and said, what percentage is male? And so you remove, and in a college town, there's more girls going to college than there is males. So then that dropped it in like, let's say 46. And then they said, okay, white. And then that dropped it lower. And then they said lean. That was the one that got my attention. 70% of people in that age category are overweight. So now you got an individual who, as eyewitnesses there, that literally like 2 out of 10 meet that qualification of white guy that's lean.
Yeah.
And he has a white car and he's out there. And for some reason, he doesn't have an alibi. That's the part that gets me, is these pro burgers that are just brain dead. Like, he doesn't have an alibi. You know how many times Anne has begged him to give her an alibi? He won't give it because he doesn't have one. And he's never going to have one. The dude did it. It's that simple. And thank God we have a law that basically makes somebody come out and say, hey, if you plan on saying you were somewhere else, then you need to like give the defense a chance to verify that. Because what if you say you're with XYZ person? Well, they need to go interview that person and verify it. Rules and all that stuff. Matter of fact, one of the laws we're working on is once this individual has been charged, you put money on his books and we'll be taking that money. It won't be going, it will be going to pay for his prosecution and to help victims and mothers and people with counseling and other things. So go ahead and send money now, but once he's convicted,
they were going to go down that road.
By law, they have to. Idaho law, not federal law. We're building. Old Thompson, he was like a Santa Claus. I think Thompson's skin's gotten tougher, and I think he's gotten a little bit more fighter spirit. And I think seeing us battle with going through all the things that we've gone out with, there's stuff that people don't know. People like vandalizing, people showing up at our house, people posting pictures of our address, all this stuff. And I think he thought, if they're going to go through this, then I'm gonna do the will of the victims. And but I don't know if his heart was always in it. 100%. It's hard. Nobody really wants to murder, and go through a murder case and have to end somebody else's life. None of us want to do this. And we were forced to do this. We were forced into this behavior. We don't want nothing to do with this loser. I mean, this guy was literally 27 years old living with his parents. He's a complete loser. It's absolutely frustrating that my daughter got murdered by a complete loser. She's graduating a year early on the dean's list. Nobody else was graduating a year early in that around her. She was a rock star, and this loser ends up sneaking in and killing her. So the least he can do is pay the ultimate price. And I think I've said this before in the past. Maybe the reason we have these school shooters and maybe we have these mass killings is because we never force people, especially youth, that see somebody like Brian and there's all these fan clubs and stuff and think, well, I'm that loser too. And the
So yeah, he goes pretty into the whole narrative, that Brian he's sticking with that incel narrative, which is, I believe, the FBI profile from the start, and he's continuing to draw on it. And while this may have been the case with that Rogers kid or whatever, the incel is not working with the Brian theory. This It's just so stark a narrative between this and things that we've uncovered, and it's hard to reconcile these differences. I think he has a lot more information than we're aware of. So I'm just trying to keep my mind open.
by now, the same people who make these lies up, and I'm like, well, where's your warrants? If some other person's involved, where are these warrants at? There's some guy out there that they hear on that Linda Lane. Probably shouldn't say his name just because he's probably sitting in jail wondering why people are even talking about him. I think Farley or some shit. Yeah. So that guy, come on, give me a break, guys. Give me a break.
Yeah.
It doesn't match up. I know the backstory where that Linda Lane came from, and it was a money grab. It was literally, I know the exact person that went and purchased this thing, and so they tried to get me to release it or discuss it or bring it up in one of the interviews that I was doing, and get me to echo some of the things that were on it. So I had some people look at it themselves, and they were like, it's either been the audio has been manipulated, or it's so poor quality that they didn't have any confidence in it. And some of the things that are the times don't match up to the times that I know my daughter was moving and doing and sending texts and all these different things. So, and plus we had the 1112, I think that is the other surveillance that basically we could hear a lot clearer during the exact same times. So anyone who thinks that they're breaking a case over these cameras and whatever they're hearing, it's kind of naive. It's naive to think that you heard something and everybody's going to throw this investigation off and not and overlook something that you found is so amazing. This true crime stuff is it's an eye opener. It sucks to have your daughter's murder be like some form of somebody's like entertainment. And they like to go out there and stir up their followers and make narratives that are more like for novels than real life. So it's terrible, and I don't know what I'm going to do if I ever cross one of these people.
Yeah.
I've thought to myself, do I just go to jail? And do I just,
Not worth it.
but it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard,
Yeah.
And it's not most of them. There's only a few that are like that. I mean, most people are trying to be honest, and like you are, and you have been, and I don't even expect you to always be right. We haven't been right every time either. So I just expect people to be honorable and don't purposely spin a narrative that in the back of your mind is false, and you just hope that your users never cross the same information that you found. You go suppress certain things to keep your narrative alive longer. I'm almost positive that there's people doing that, because I've seen other people make comments that said, hey, this happened at this time, this doesn't follow your scenario, and then they just strike that. That thing's been deleted. They delete it after a certain amount of time. So it tells me that this person isn't after the truth. They're just